Stephen King once wrote in his autobiography that when he's done writing macabre stories of Tales of the Dark, he likes to unwind with an episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki, and Stephen King also wrote about a child gangbang of 11-year-olds in the sewer, so...
That's true. That's true. Also, he probably doesn't listen to the show. Stephen King, if you do, let us know. That'd be great. But anyway, this is Reap the Spoils. We're a monthly spoiler cast where we pick a video game and we play it and then we talk about it. And that's what we're here to do right now. It's kind of a late October title, but it's also like kind of fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
Jason, what are we talking about today?
Talking about Alan Wake.
Yeah, we're talking about Alan Wake. He's a writer. I think he tells you that at the very beginning of the game, probably at the end of the game too.
Yep.
He does the writing. If you have not played Alan Wake, don't listen to this episode. We're gonna spoil it. We're gonna spoil everything, and that includes the DLC, which is the Signal and the Writer. It's two DLC episodes. We're gonna talk about them. If you have not played Alan Wake or its DLC, don't listen to this episode. Go play those things, then come back, and then listen to this episode, so we don't ruin the experience for you. A remaster just came out in early October. Perfect time to get a new version of Alan Wake and play it. It's kind of why we're talking about it right now. So yeah, do that. But if you have played it, if you have played Alan Wake and its DLC, you're in the right place. So let's let's dig into the brief history lesson. You guys ready for that?
Yes.
Before we start talking about this dreary tale. All right, Alan Wake. It was released and developed by Remedy Entertainment. Released on May 18th. 2010 exclusively for the Xbox 360. Came to PC a little under 2 years later in February 2012, and we got the remaster on October 5th, 2021. And I also threw in there just that, and I don't want to talk a lot about this. There was a DLC released for the game Control, the most recent Remedy Entertainment video game, called AWE, and that heavily focuses on Alan Wake. And we'll kind of get into why loosely, so we don't spoil major things from Control. So yeah, that's worth checking out. I wouldn't say it's required playing for this episode, but definitely go play Control and listen to our episode on it too. We recorded that one
Before the
2
DLC
years
came
ago.
out, so we didn't
Yeah.
talk about the DLC.
Yeah, the DLC wasn't out for that game yet. Not even the first one, I don't think. So we did not get to talk about that. Maybe in the future we should do a discussion about that.
Yeah, I'd be down.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of all I got for Alan Wake. You know, just trying to keep these things brief. Just give some historical dates, and that's really it. So I guess let's jump into this story, huh?
Ending?
The ending, yeah. If you have, again, this is your final warning. If you haven't played Alan Wake, don't listen further. Go play it and then come back. Just press that pause button. Go play. You know, it's like a 15-hour game. Would you guys say? And come back and then we can talk about it.
I guess 15 hours including the DLC?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like a 12-hour game, maybe 3 additional hours to the DLC, because they're both like maybe an hour long.
And it also depends. There are sections of the game where if you really want to, you can spend a lot more time in a chapter than you need to, because the world kind of opens up. You're driving around, but you can. There are optional places you can stop at if you want to.
Jason, did you do that? Did you go out of your way?
Not intentionally.
Oh. I was excited that we were going to jump right into the Jason test if he started seeking out collectibles and looking for things he didn't need.
I actually got almost all of them, but not like I didn't go out of my way to do it.
Okay.
Most of them are kind of on the beaten path.
Yeah. even playing through this is weird. We're starting off with collectibles. Even going through and not like using a guide, I got the vast and also like mostly sticking to the beaten path. I played this game before last year, so it's still relatively fresh in my mind. So there were some things off the beaten path that I remembered and knew to go pick up. And that all being said, by the time I beat the game the first time, I had found like 87 out of 100 of the thermoses and the majority of the manuscript pages. So when I went back through on Nightmare, I didn't have too much cleanup to do. But yeah, like most of the stuff is on the beaten path. You don't have to trail off too far.
There were some though that you would have to climb all the way high up on a mountain, and Alan has really bad stamina and he walks really slow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
I
if
know.
you died on your way back, you would have to go all the way back up the mountain to get that collectible because the game doesn't save your collectibles if you die. I really
Mhm.
hated that.
Yeah, admittedly that is really frustrating. But anyway, yeah, we could talk more about collectibles later. Let's get into the story. Let's get into the ending of this video game, which and just the game proper for now. We'll get into the DLC later, but Alan, Mr. Wake, he gets that clicker, that little device. And he goes back. He's able to make his way back to the cabin within the dark place, and he gets to stick it into Barbara's her chest. Just puts his hand right in there, clicks that button, and boom, light defeats darkness. Some Kingdom Hearts shit. How did you guys feel about this ending? That's only part of it.
Yeah, that specific part. The second part, I think I vibe with a lot more, but that part, I was like, this is dumb.
Here's a better question. How do you guys so yeah, going further, he kind of winds up sending himself to the dark place and he's able to free Alice. He writes her out of the story and gives her an escape, but he forces himself to stay behind. And as he goes to write, you get that line at the end. It's not a lake, it's an ocean. How did you guys feel about that as being like kind of a mic drop moment? How do you guys interpret that line too? I guess is a good question.
The way I saw that line and the ending as a whole, and I actually really liked this ending, which is why I did not particularly care for the DLC. I didn't think it was necessary.
Okay.
I actually think it retroactively worsens it all. Very much like Stephen King likes to do, which we'll talk about a little more in a second. But no, the fact that we never really find out what Barbara is. It's just darkness. It goes back to a line that Alan Wake talks. He talks about a line from again Stephen. They lay it on really thick in this game that Stephen King was a big influence on this game.
There's two things that they like layer on really heavily that are big influences in this game. We're gonna talk about one of those later.
But,
I'm excited.
But he references a line from Stephen King's book on writing. About horror being tied to the illogical. So the fact that we never get an explanation really, up to that point at least, we know vague stories about this guy, this author who came before, Thomas Zane and his girlfriend. We'll get into that, I'm sure. We have, what I'm trying to get at is we have vague comprehensions of things that might have happened before, but we don't really know what this force of darkness is. We don't know what Barbara really is. All we know is that this clicker with the light holds emotional resonance with Alan, and there's this evil force, and he's going to use it. So when he does that, and he writes Alice, his wife, out of the story to save her, and in doing so traps himself in the dark place or whatever, and says it's not a lake, it's an ocean. I didn't really take it to mean anything in and of itself, other than Alan is kind of freeing everybody, all the fucking collateral damage he's left in his wake, of his own fucking insanity as an author, of all the shit that has come out of his mind and into the world. Like, thematically speaking, because that's kind of what I drew from the game.
Be fair,
overall.
To be fair, it's not really his doing. It's the Dark Presence's doing, The dark during that week at the beginning of the game where he has no idea what happened, and you come to find out that it was Barbara under the influence of the dark presence, forcing his hand to write the story. It's not really things that he was putting out there. It's stuff that the dark presence was kind of forcing him to put out there.
But that's more my point. Is the quote? It's not like it's an ocean. I did not interpret that to mean anything other than Alan is just. He's an author. He's a creative person. Therefore, he's a little unhinged, and that unhinged nature, when taken by dark powers, can be dangerous. So it's now trapped, and it's a bittersweet ending. He was able to save his wife, but now he is trapped, and he will never see her again.
It was at a cost.
Yes, it was at a cost, which again goes back to another line that Alan says at the beginning of the game, where the protagonist never survives a good horror story, or something like that. Mm-hmm. I felt like thematically everything with that ending tied in nicely. It's not perfect, like it doesn't explain everything, and it doesn't need to, and quite frankly shouldn't. A good horror story shouldn't. That's what made classic authors like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, who was more adventure and pulp action, but did horror stuff with like fucking Solomon Kane. The fact, and even Conan, like they don't explain how the fucking magic works. It's just fucking evil and scary as shit and grotesque in its description. And it's effective.
And to go back to your point of us not really knowing what the dark place or the dark presence is, I feel like even in the DLC that's not really explained. It's kind of explained in Control a little bit. It self-contained within this game. It's not really anything that's explainable. But now that Remedy is trying to make this big connected universe, they're trying to go back and connect the dots, and I just wanted to provide that little bit, maybe to get the listeners to if they haven't played Control, to go play it. But Delaila, your thoughts on that final line?
I interpreted it as Alan has been trying to rewrite this story over and over again to fix whatever's happening in the world with this darkness and to save his wife, that there's so many stories and perhaps even darkness that has spread beyond the lake, beyond what's this place called?
The dark place.
Bright Falls.
Cauldron Lake.
Yes, Bright Falls. Yeah.
Oh, Bright Falls. Okay.
And that this phenomenon is happening in other places for whatever reason, and that his story, because of re-editing over and over again to try and get this end goal of saving his wife, has then manifested these I would say alternate timelines, but that sounds too Marvel. Yeah. It's something a little more sophisticated than that.
You're tapping on something. That's another. This was a more subtle thing that they threw in there. Was Alan would constantly complain about people editing his work, whether it was actual editors in the real world, whether it was his wife, whether it was Barry, whether it was, and then eventually we find out Barbara was editing this manuscript that she was forcing him to write. So the game is very subtly meta in that way, which is why I came to interpret it as it's almost like one giant metaphor for the insanity of the creator. The insanity, which is just a philosophical discussion about creativity and humanity in general.
Yeah, and I sort of, with that theory, further theorize how can this connect to Control, because I don't know, because I didn't play the Control DLC, so this is just speculation. This is not confirming, but there's this dark presence also in that game, and moving objects and stuff like that. So I thought that maybe it spread to wherever that was, and that the organization in Control was actually trying to get a handle on it. But I really don't know if that's accurate at all. I just figured they got involved with whatever was happening here over there as well.
What I'll say on that is that, and this also ties into how I kind of look at this final line. Let's keep in mind that Alan Wake originally came out in 2010. Control wasn't until 2019, and there's definitely evidence that there were plans for that game in place, or at least some of the story elements were definitely in place, at least by the time that I believe Alan Wake American Nightmare came out, which was like an Xbox Live Arcade title, as a smaller thing. Um, it's kind of it's explained in Control through like some documents that you could just find, not even in the DLC. Like I said, the DLC is not really required playing. It's just they took some thematic elements from Alan Wake and some characters and weaved it into Control. We find out that
does it have to do with this whole secret society thing? Because I was like, what the fuck? Why is this even here?
somewhat, yeah. So
Okay.
what I'll say is well, there's also something else that plays into, but you come to find out that this whole game is viewed in Control as the Bright Falls Altered World event. It's the Bright Fall this Bright Falls incident was an AWE to the FBC in Control, and Cauldron Lake. I think Cauldron Lake specifically is considered a place of power due to the dark presence that lies within it, due to the dark place that lies below it, and the influence that the dark presence has over the entire town. So this is like a small part of that whole game's like Control's whole like mythos and thesis statement that it's trying to convey. Realistically, any game that Remedy could put out going forward could just be a different altered world event that Control that could tie into Control somehow. That's seemingly how they've set this up a little bit. But sticking to Alan Wake now, and how I kind of tie that in and look at that final line is Alan Wake being in the dark place under Cauldron, or kind of absorbed down below Cauldron Lake. He realizes that there's a lot more to everything that's going on than just that lake. And that's kind of how I view it. He realizes the bigger picture while he's down there. It's not a lake, it's an ocean. That's kind of, and that's a pretty simplistic look, but that's kind of how I'm choosing to look at it. And I have a feeling that might be how they choose to look at it going forward, just because it's like the simplest way to interpret it, given everything else they've set up since.
And the simplest way to just keep these games coming.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the future, not even of just Remedy, but of this game in particular at the end of the show. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at the ending in terms of that line. I guess we could talk about the DLC story, what they add, and it's basically just fleshing out Zane.
Yeah.
And I here's a question, because I definitely remember from my first playthrough, I didn't realize how big Thomas Zane was going to play into the plot. They bring up his name a couple times in the first few chapters, and then suddenly his name is getting flung around so constantly. Did that kind of blindside you guys too? In terms of his involvement with the plot?
Yeah, at first I thought he was just like a character that Alan was writing, but then it seems like it was quite the opposite. Like Zane was the one writing all this shit, and
like he's the reason that Alan had the clicker.
Yeah,
he was essentially Thomas Zane's contingency plan.
Yeah. In terms of being blindsided, I actually had been predicting throughout most of it, and I think that the story was being written this way. And speaking of Stephen King, I think they wrote this story very much like Stephen King writes his story, which is they didn't plan it at all. They kind of just had an idea of what they were doing and then just started writing and see where it went. And it ended up and that's what Stephen King does, and he does it very successfully, and they did a pretty good job too. I think originally Thomas Zane was supposed to be Alan Wake. I think the idea originally was going to be that, because at several points it seems like it lays on like a reveal that like he is Thomas Zane or he is in an insane asylum, and then there's it borders on feeling like Deus Ex Machina, where oh no, you really are Alan Wake, and this really is all happening. You understand if you get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
can see that for sure.
So yeah, I understand why you feel like Thomas Zane. It kind of feels weird how suddenly he becomes very involved and then isn't involved and then all of a sudden is very involved again.
Yeah, it's just like how I forget the exact first mention. I think it's Alan like picking up a manuscript paper or reading something at some point early in the game, and he mentions his name, that he was a poet. And also replaying the game, I did notice allusions to Thomas Zane. Like in the very first, I think it's in the tutorial, which is just Alan having a nightmare that takes place in the dark place. If you go back and play that opening segment again, it kind of connects those dots a little bit, that's what's going on there.
Mhm.
There's a in the one building, there's a poster on the door that is like a movie poster with a diver on it for Tom the Poet, and it has
Yeah.
like a bunch of citizens of Bright Falls listed on the poster. It's framed very much as like a movie poster. I didn't notice that in my first playthrough. But yeah, his name is mentioned, and then I kind of just forgot. This was like on my first playthrough. I just kind of forgot about that name until it starts getting brought up much more consistently, and I'm like, wait, who is this guy? Why is he important? I
Yeah.
don't remember this. And it's like, oh, because he's mentioned in a conversation from Barry as when he was doing some research on the town, and I guess I just kind of disregarded it. But yeah, the DLC with Alan being in the dark place with Thomas Zane, and Thomas is trying to guide him back to kind of reclaim and his himself that was going insane, which was a little bit of an obtuse storyline, if I'm being honest.
Oh yeah.
You know what it is? And I mentioned earlier I would use a comparison to Stephen King that's very relevant. It's like in It, when you find out that Pennywise the Clown is actually a fucking interdimensional space demon spider
Yeah.
that needs to eat children to survive, and suddenly it isn't very scary anymore. It's just dumb as shit.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. This is,
I mean,
and it goes back to what the actual quote is in the game when Alan Wake says fear or horror is tied to the illogical. Like you're not supposed to understand it. That's why I prefer just the base ending of the game and just leaving it
yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what the DLC was trying to do, story-wise, was it was trying to provide like an epilogue of sorts for the other characters without actually showing them. Like there's like cardboard cutouts that you can find that are all these like book deals that these characters got thanks to Barry. Obviously, after Alan disappeared, Barry started heavily monetizing the events of the game. But also like it attempted to provide some closure to Alice, and it ended on, and this is I guess the important part, it ended on trying to give some hope to Alan coming back. And I think this is the only part that's really important about that DLC, is that he makes his way back to the cabin and he sits down and starts to write the manuscript from the game being Departure. He starts to write Return, and it ends on Alan saying once again, like, my name is Alan Wake, I'm a writer. And he begins to write seemingly a manuscript that will allow him to come back, assuming
Right.
that the dark presence is still going to enact whatever he writes. I think that's really all that's important from that. Like, nothing else too major happens in that DLC or in either of them. Like, you get some more info from Zane, but it's overall not very important.
Yeah. I hated the
Um,
DLCs.
I mean, I think the stuff that it introduced was interesting. Just like the smaller mechanics that they decided to do, like the whole idea of flashing your light at words to bring them to life, which was something used at the very end of the main game, having like a whole chapter surrounding like that mechanic, I thought it was interesting. But overall, they were just like kind of mini episodes that didn't amount to much interesting plot wise. Whereas the whole game, every single episode of the game is structured like a television serial, and there's like always an interesting thing with an interesting twist at the end happening in each one of those episodes. So it leaves you like kind of wanting to see what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
And the DLCs, didn't really have that. Like the last one does, obviously, because it ends on the cliffhanger of Alan starting to write a new manuscript to get himself to come back. The first one, though, I couldn't even really tell you what was going on.
Yeah.
He comes to the TVs of himself going insane and has to stop them, and he kind of wakes up. And I don't even. Yeah.
Was that TV in control in one of the like cells?
I don't think it was like the same one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's probably a different object of
It's
power.
probably a reference to it, though. Yeah.
Maybe it's overall, I'd say it's not very important.
Yeah.
There are definitely more clear references to Alan Wake in Control, and so I kind of wouldn't count that as one of them personally. But it's been a while since I played Control. Maybe I'll have to go back to it.
Yeah, same.
But how did you guys? We talked a little bit about Thomas Zane. What did you guys think about Alan as a character, as a protagonist?
I do not like Alan at all. Like he's probably one of my least favorite characters in video games. Period.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree, and this is why I think that they originally had a very different direction in mind, and it kind of just grew. They didn't really know where they were going to go. So, just a bit of background. Stephen King is very famous for being what's called in writing a pantser, which means he doesn't plan his books. Very few people do this successfully, and even Stephen King has written a lot of books, and not very many of them are remembered. But pantsers are notorious for not being able to nail their endings. And in this one, I actually feel like they eventually got. I like I said, I like the ending.
Yeah.
But it seems like throughout the entire narrative, they had a different idea of where the ending was. And at the beginning, it seemed to me like Alan Wake was supposed to be something more akin to, oh fuck, can't remember the actual character's name. Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Jack Torrance.
Yes, thank you. Where he's supposed to be unlikable because we're supposed to be following him going insane, and his creativity is wreaking havoc and destruction upon the people around him and hurting everybody within his purview, whether they deserve it or not.
I didn't even see Alan as that menacing, but yeah, when you interpret it like that, definitely makes sense. I just think like all this happened because like his wife wanted to help him get over his writer's block, and she was trying to do something nice, and he had a tantrum about it.
Yo, I liked his wife, the character, but that character model, man, oh my god,
all the character model. The only one that really looked okay was Alan. All the rest of them look very off. Like Barry being one of the ones you see the most, and like the remaster didn't do them much justice. Really,
but I do agree. I do agree with you, Delaila, about the character of the wife. Like, I just felt bad for the fucking wife, man. The wife just got fucked over by everybody.
Yeah.
Another thing to point out is that the clicker was written in by Thomas Zane, and Alan coming to, you can kind of surmise. I don't think it's ever explicitly said or stated or anything, but you can kind of guess that Alan coming to Bright Falls was also a creation of Thomas Zane. So like, is it Alice's influence that drove them there, or is it Zane's influence? I think it might be the latter versus the former.
Now, here's
Um,
something I might just be misremembering. Wasn't the clicker Alice's? Wasn't it like
no,
something that
so
was given to her? I remember
it
in one of the
was
early episodes when it's explaining her fear of the dark, it was like a token that was given to her to help her, handle whenever like the power went out or something like that.
so
Mhm.
it was given to Alan by his mother when he was a child,
No, I know that's
and
what it
he
says
gives it to
later on.
He gives it to Alice,
Okay, so
saying
Alan gave it
like,
to
here,
Alice.
my
Okay.
mom, yeah, he gives this whole story where like, oh, my mom gave this to me when I was a kid, and when if there were any dark monsters, I just have to press this and a magic light would appear and drive them
He,
away.
I
And she
was,
didn't believe that story. She thought that
yeah.
story was bogus.
Okay, okay.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of was, because Thomas Zane just wrote it so
Yeah.
that there
Well,
would
it's
be
literal.
something that was
It's
powerful
literal
enough.
It's literally
Yeah,
supposed, but it's supposed to be Deus Ex Machina.
right.
Like
It's not. It's not like just a contrivance. It's like an intentional contrivance that
right, right.
that the character in the story wrote in to make sure that this evil was defeatable.
Hmm.
Although
Um.
technically, they made sure though to foreshadow it enough. I just forgot.
Mhm.
I forgot that they had said that Alan had given it to her. I thought that was
Yeah.
something that she had already had. That's why
Now the
I was a bit confused when it came up that it was his from his childhood. I was
yeah.
like, wait a minute, did the writers forget to,
No, that cutscene was all him giving it to her.
okay.
Because Alice has a genuine fear of the dark, so he gave that to her to make her feel better.
Hmm.
um but
What did you guys think of
Alan,
Alan?
yeah. I
I wanted
disagree
him to
with
go
both of
full.
you.
I wanted him to go full Jack Nicholson. Like I wanted him to be the
I
Yeah.
would
bad
have
guy.
preferred that. I probably
Man,
would have liked
Yeah,
him a little more.
what do you guys have against Alan? Damn.
because he's a fucking like millionaire and he's bitching and whining and
I
complaining
know,
because he
and you
can't
know
write a
what,
book.
but
It,
here's the
it's
thing.
he's literally given all these unlikable traits. The only thing that is likable from like a character perspective is just his dedication to his wife. But even then, like in terms of like his determination and stubbornness and just he's always thinking, okay, how do I get Alice?
But
How do I get Alice? How do I get
I
Alice?
guess the reason
But at the same time, it's all his fault. Like,
Right.
I guess the reason I like him so much, though, as a character, is how often do we get protagonists in games that are like him, that are highly successful and have it all and kind of pompous and a dick about it. Like when he goes to leave the sheriff's office, he just like says to Barry, like, "Get me out of here." Like he's kind of a dick, but like
I ended up
I don't
liking
know, I
Barry
find
way
that.
more than him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about Barry, but like I just mean from the perspective of like he's so different from what we typically get in a story, right? He's such a different protagonist, and I
Oh,
really
sure.
admire that they kind of made a character that was in a lot of ways unlikable.
Yeah.
Right.
Like and to your point, Jason, the fact
I'm
that
not
he's
saying.
super
I'm not
hold on.
saying. Oh
Hold
yeah,
on.
yeah, sure.
The fact that he's very compassionate and cares about finding and saving his wife, that does kind of redeem him, right? You are still rooting for him
Yes.
at the end of the day, in
Yeah.
spite of all of his flaws. And I from all that, I think he's a very well written character, and I do like him a lot, even
Yes.
still acknowledging like, yeah, he really is an asshole.
Yes.
I just like the fact that they
I
wrote
don't.
a character like that versus someone that's just like the nicest guy and is just down
Yeah.
on his luck. And I really admire what they did with this.
No, I totally agree with you. I don't want to be misunderstood. I
Mhm.
was agreeing with Delilah in that he's very unlikable.
Oh yeah, no, he
But
totally is.
but I agree with you that I liked that he was unlikable. I
Yeah.
just wish they had gone further with it.
Okay.
But
See,
that doesn't mean I think what's there is bad.
I think there's few games that can pull off turning you from the good guy to the bad guy, and I don't know that with the story they had it would have fit very well personally, but yeah, that I really I like the way Alan is written, and I just like that he's different from a lot of other protagonists, like the typical video game protagonist you get.
Mhm.
I really admire that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. He's a dick. That's
Yeah,
all.
he is.
Yeah.
No, he's totally a dick. I'm not refuting that. Don't worry. Like I said, like it cracks me up when they leave in the sheriff's office. Barry shows up and he's just like, he looks at Barry, he's like, "Get me out of here," and then he just walks out the door.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Alan, it seems like you did that all on your own. And like,
Yeah.
and even that same scene when Hartman like starts to tell him like, "Oh, I invited you, your wife." Oh, and that's another big factor into what drove them there.
That's a plot line though that maybe you can illuminate this for me, because that felt like just a dropped plot line for me. The fact that you have both Hartman and the kidnappers were being, I assumed, because I don't remember it explicitly saying, being told by somebody, presumably the Dark Force, to lead Alan to them with the manuscript.
Yeah. That
was it supposed to be Zane or the Dark Force? It felt very dropped, rushed, and incoherently.
So I wouldn't say it was dropped or rushed. I would say it wasn't explicitly told, because the pieces are there. It's just about putting them together. And basically, yeah, the Dark Presence is so powerful that it has a hold over the town, as we see throughout the entire game, including Hartman. And Hartman being running this clinic for troubled artists, and Alan being the person that's going to come and be influenced by the Dark Presence to write this story. Hartman is under the influence of the Dark Presence, basically, and kind of I should have mentioned earlier, I guess I kind of forgot to. Yeah, it was really instrumental in organizing Alice and Alan's arrival in Bright Falls. I guess it didn't really have as much to do with Thomas Zane as I was alluding to earlier. That's my mistake. There's a lot of there, and that's kind of the thing with this game, is there's a lot of things that aren't explicitly stated. The pieces are there, you just have to put them together.
Yeah, the impression I got when I was going through it, just because those lines were just dropped so quickly and never touched on again, was that I thought, or started thinking, that Hartman probably had a much larger role originally in their minds when they started writing this game, and that's why I think that he was originally supposed to descend into madness.
Maybe.
And that would have been, honestly, that would have been awesome. Like, imagine a scene where whatever force convinces Alan that he has to kill Barry in order to save Alice. Like, I mean, it's not heroic, and obviously you're gonna dislike him even more. He's gonna go from being a dick to being straight up, what's the word, sociopathic. But you understand the reasoning because of that determination throughout the entire time. He's just trying to get to his wife, but that also could be a perceived driver of his madness. And that's another thing. It almost felt like the game was trying to convince you that he was going insane because they're medicating him and they're talking about his wife dying. But then, like you said, it doesn't. I feel like it needed to explicitly state that Hartman was under an external influence, because it gets confusing and messy. At least it did for me.
I think it becomes pretty confirmed once you encounter him out in the
yes. But what I'm saying is, it is in the meantime, when you confront him, I don't interpret that as, oh, he was always under the influence of the dark forces.
He just became influenced.
Yeah,
because at that point, we don't even know. We don't know how the fuck the dark forces operate. So it's like there are no rules established for it.
Yeah, it's never clear how someone becomes the possessed dark figures that you're seeing running around versus someone that's under the influence of. Well, I guess with Rose you see that a little bit, but even she was so obviously taken over by something, whereas Hartman just seemed a little more aware of what was happening when you were in dialogue with him. That it wasn't very clear that he.
So in my mind, to that point, in my mind, to that point, Alan Wake really was in the hospital and being medicated. So literally, he could have been fucking imagining everything up until that point. and then Hartman gets taken over. And I mean, obviously later on we learn that that's not the case, but it's just confusing for a while because you don't know what's real and what's not. And I guess that's the point, and that's what they're aiming for. But it's just a little frustrating.
The difference is that Hartman was kind of open to being in cahoots with the Dark Presence, right? Because he was kind of using it to his own advantage. The Dark Place takes the works of writers and artists and turns them to life. And what's Hartman? He's a therapist, psychologist specializing in the artist's dilemma.
Sure, but he's in the game so little that it's just. And I'm assuming some of this stuff is also like in like like you can read those manuscript pages or whatever.
Well, the manuscript pages, and I find that to be an interesting thing, right? Because the manuscript pages, you'll find one and it'll openly spoil what's happening next, right?
I didn't read any of them, so I don't know.
Oh my god. Okay, well, yeah, you pick up the manuscript pages and they'll describe an event that maybe hasn't. And I was thinking to myself, well, it's kind of shitty to read these things and get spoiled on what's happening. But then I kind of came to realize, well, no, that's the point. Like, the point is he wrote this manuscript and all of it's coming true. So as he's picking up the pages, he's reading them to know what happens next.
Right.
That's the whole point of the manuscript, of chasing down the manuscript, and also the point of Thomas Zane giving it to Alan. By the way, he's the one that's kind of trickling those pages to him throughout the game. It's to give him a warning, to let him know, like, here's the page of the thing that you wrote that's coming to life. You turn this corner, and this is going to happen. Which I think is really interesting from a narrative perspective, in terms of mixing narrative with gameplay, kind of telling you what's going to happen next, and kind of explaining that through that way. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, I still enjoyed the story for what it was. Like, I know it sounds like I'm coming down on it a lot, and honestly, the things I'm coming down on are more nitpicks and things I would have preferred over what we got. But at the same time,
I think that's the thing. You had a perception of what.
I still enjoyed the story for what it was. Okay. And again, honestly, Stephen King comparison. Anybody who's read The Dark Tower, infamous for having one of the most disappointing endings of all time.
Yeah. I feel like that is true with a lot of his books, though. Like you said, you mentioned that earlier, and it's definitely something that's kind of known about him.
Yes.
He can write a hell of a story, but it doesn't know how to end it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about more of the characters. Let's talk about Barry. We haven't really talked much about Barry.
Barry's
my favorite character.
Is he? Yeah, is he not the best character? Like, he's absolutely the best character.
When he came out with the Christmas lights, I was like, oh my god.
It's like garlic to vampires.
Yeah.
And I also, during that same segment, where he mentions the headlamp, and Alan's like, I want one of those, and he's like, last one, and Alan's just like, bastard. It's nice to get those moments between them where they're definitely clearly, like, they've been friends for a long time and they've been working together for a long time. I really liked their chemistry.
Yeah, they're fucking hungover in a police cell in the middle of all that shit, and he's just like, I want a pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, the whole town has gone to shit. Alan and Sheriff Breaker are about to leave to go out into the town, and Barry's just like saying, like, Al, you think I could order a pizza? You think it would get here?
Yeah.
I was like, no. Make your calls, Barry. Like, what the fuck?
Barry's awesome. The thing that throws me off about him is how competent he is in navigating this darkness on his own. There's so many times where you like split up with him and then meet up with him again, and he's just fine.
I assumed he would die. Him and the she wasn't the sheriff. She was the deputy.
Sarah,
yeah. Well,
she was the sheriff.
Was she the sheriff? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, going back to the control stuff. Yeah, they're the secret organization or whatever, the secret society. where they make the call to her dad and just say Night Springs. I think it's in a note in Control that her dad, who was a former cop in New York City, her dad was an agent for the FBC. Further tying those two games together, and why that secret society exists. It's because of him working at the FBC, he was aware of Cauldron Lake being a place of power.
There's also like a reference in the DLC, I believe it's the first one, the part where you're outside and he's like the road was more just disappeared, and like you're in the town center and like there's just a giant crack. You see a sign that looks a lot like the signs of Alan Wake throughout the majority of the main game, the advertisements for his book, except it's for Sarah, and she's now an author in the Dark World or whatever. And if you actually go up and read it, it says something to the effect of like small town cop, member of secret society, etc., etc. So like it does reference it in the Dark World as well.
What did you guys think of Agent Nightingale?
Again, he's a red shirt. It's a what the fuck character.
Yeah.
And this is again one of those things. I know I keep bringing it up. It makes me think that they had other ideas for the character, because it's definitely hinted at that there was a backstory and he had an ulterior motive, and it's just never fucking explained.
Yeah, he just really he seems like such a wasted character, if I'm being honest, because like he shows up with no fanfare. Like, why suddenly is there an FBI agent here to arrest Alan? And then furthermore, like, he has it out for him so much, and he's just kind of an asshole for next to no reason. And you can find his motel room, and there's nothing really interesting in there except for some supplies.
Oh, there was going to be a big reveal, like, and then I realized it was completely optional, and it was just like ammo, and I'm like,
yeah, it really wasn't much interesting about him, but like he was so comically annoying because he just, and like I don't know. I mean, I don't know any FBI agents, but I can't imagine like so many of them are so well read to just spit out a different author's name every time he addresses Alan.
Right, like you started saying like Hemingway, and I was like,
yeah.
He's like, get back here, Edgar Allan Poe. I'm like, all right, guys, you're landing on a little. And honestly,
you hear that, H.P. Lovecraft? Like, dude, calm down.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think because he fits straight in with, you know, the hard nosed, hard drinking, you know, cop stereotype, just like Barry fits the best friend stereotype. A lot of these characters fit very, very neatly into stereotypes, which I think was done purposefully. I just think that him in particular, they had more in mind. They definitely hinted at it, and it's still in there. And again, I think it just got edited out at the end of the day, with whether they were just trying to shorten the game for whatever reason, or they decided to go a different direction or take things out. I think that's why he just gets offed as suddenly as he does, and they're just like, all right, just make him a red shirt, and he can just be kind of a red herring antagonist for a little while.
Yeah.
I have no thoughts. I forgot who he was.
Exactly.
That's fine.
That's literally the definition of a red shirt. For those of you who don't know a red shirt in Star Trek, they're the security personnel have red shirts. They're nameless people who go out and get fucking bushwhacked by fucking aliens.
I mean, I mostly wanted to bring him up just because, I do feel like there's a lot of wasted potential there, and he's kind of just needless. But mostly, just to talk about the fact that he just, like, it's so comically bizarre just how he starts calling Alan a different author's name every single time he addresses him. It's like, who does that?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Another, like, probably really important character that we haven't touched on yet is Cynthia. The Lady of the Light.
Oh, yes.
who is this old flame of Thomas Zane that misses him dearly, and obviously lost him to Barbara, really the dark presence. And she's the one that kind of helps you. How did you guys feel about her?
I felt bad because Zane is just as much of a dick as Alan Wake because he's literally using her. That's literally her purpose in the story. Is Zane just uses her to give shit to Alan.
She's honestly the person I was rooting for the most because I was like, she is so like, she went in so survival mode when this darkness came that when like things finally got better in Brightfall and she was able to get back to her normal life, I was like, she's the only one that I feel like gets it, you know? And I have a question for her, something that I found interesting. Is she the one that left all the yellow markers for collectibles around the world?
Yeah.
Okay. It was
that's Zane like telling her to like do shit
to do that. Okay.
For him,
okay.
Yeah. She's like I the way I interpreted it was that she was like his physical minion in the world doing shit, like leaving shit for Wake.
I guess that's a way to look at it. I personally just, I don't know if I would go that far. I'm not sure. You might be right, but I think she's the only one she's just the only one that knows, like that really truly and very clearly knows what's going on in the town.
Yeah,
she knows how to survive it.
Yeah, in Lovecraftian terms, she's the believer. The Catholic always survives in an H.P. Lovecraft story. That's why. It's because they believe.
And in something that I'll talk about more, because can't talk about, I seemingly can't go an episode now without bringing it up. She's essentially the log lady in Twin Peaks. The log lady having this log that speaks to her, and like because of it she knows the truth about the town and knows things about the town, and that's kind of what she's playing off. She has basically the same mannerisms as the log lady, and she kind of even talks similarly to her, and I'll get more into that because there's a lot of parallels there. This game was extreme. If this game was only like secondarily inspired by Stephen King, it was primarily inspired by Twin Peaks.
It's funny how much you talk about that. I've never seen that show. It's funny how much you talk about it.
I'm going to talk about it more in a bit. I'm going to say this again, but I'll say it now. Everyone should go watch Twin Peaks. That's all I'm going to say for this moment in time. But anyway, yeah, that's basically what Cynthia is. She's the log lady of Bright Falls, and she's the only one that really knows how to survive the town. So you could be right. Thomas might be influencing her to go place those supply caches all throughout town and those little messages. But I think she's just doing it because she knows how to survive the town and she wants to leave supplies around just in case.
Yeah.
But also, for Alan specifically, it might be Zane's doing. Go ahead, Delaila.
No, I definitely saw it as a survival thing just because of her behavior with like the lights and making sure she like had generators available and things like that. And I just thought it was a really cool detail how like they didn't tell you that she left all those markings. At least I don't remember them telling me. I just kind of saw a yellow bucket in her hideout. I was like, oh, she's the one that's been doing that. That's really cool.
And I think that's all you really need, you know? Yeah. I don't want the game to be like to signpost like she's the one that's doing it. Like leaving that bucket of paint there is just like, yep, that's all I need. Cool, thank you.
Yeah,
I guess part of the reason I thought that was again going back to the perception I had of it, where Thomas Zane almost was supposed to be Alan Wake in a sense, if not literally, then metaphorically in a cyclical nature. And going back to what I said at the beginning when we were talking the concept of the insanity of the creator, and how the game is on a meta level, like the destruction of the creator's influence on all of those around them. Because you look at the parallels between Thomas Zane and Alan Wake's life, how Alan Wake and Thomas Zane both kind of indirectly harm those around them due to their creativity. Cynthia is very much hurt by Zane in the same way that Alan Wake's wife is. Although Barbara obviously more directly, because the darkness literally takes Barbara in the same way it takes Alice. But
yeah, and part of that whole, I feel like just needs to be reiterated if it wasn't iterated already, but like the whole idea of Alan being Thomas Zane, like Thomas literally wrote in Alan like into the story.
Yeah.
You know, he was his contingency. So a lot of Alan, or really Alan's predicament, is due to Thomas writing him into the story. So you could look at it as like he's Thomas
an author.
Zane,
he's an author
really,
insert.
Yeah,
he's like a Mary Sue character in Thomas Zane's own story.
Yeah, that's how that I would say that's the better way of looking at it. Just real quick on Cynthia, I do think it's really unrealistic and kind of creepy's not the right word. It's just weird that like you'll find random things written throughout the town. Like there's this one basement you can go into in a building, and all written on the wall is like, "I miss you, Tom," and it's just like, why would she just write that somewhere? That's so bizarre.
Yeah, there's that one building you go into where the roof collapses on you at one point, and it just says Tom.
Yeah, and that one I think is
I thought it was Barbara. I thought it was supposed to be Barbara. I didn't realize at first.
I think that showcases some that showcases some level of like insane what's the word I'm looking for? Like just some level of insanity, you know? Obsession. Thank you. It shows some level of obsession, right? And that I feel more effective than finding just written on the wall somewhere like, "I miss you, Tom," and then on a totally different wall within the same room is like, the taken are from the darkness,
right?
And it's just like all these little things that are written all over the town, but like I don't know, some of it was just like really weird.
Yeah.
Like who's just writing in random places like, "I miss you, long lost lover," like all throughout their town. It's to me it was a little much. And I didn't think it needed like the one room with Tom's name written everywhere would have been perfect, and just leave it at that. As like an extra little thing to find, but otherwise I thought it was a lot to take in. The last character I really care to talk about, or the last characters I should say, are the Anderson brothers, Tor and Odin. How'd you guys like them?
They were cool.
Yeah.
Not much of an opinion. Okay.
Well, no, like I feel like they were created to create some really cool gameplay set pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But their characters, like what they had dementia, they were in this. They were just there to kind of like, I guess, back Alan up on his theory that he's not actually crazy, and like kind of helping him like reach the next goal so that he can get rid of this shit.
And I'll say they were also aware, clearly, they were very aware of the goings in the town. It's just they were a little unreliable in terms of their own sanity. You know, they're permanent inmates at Hartman's clinic, and they make this insanely strong moonshine at their farm, and they used to be in a metal band. Yet they're hanging out in the diner and want to hear Lime in the Coconut. So, like,
I just made a connection.
Oh, yeah?
Going back to your theory, because I've been talking about how I thought Alan Zane, and then you brought up a very good point, which is this story is very on the nose with making direct references. It's very on the nose about its influences. It's also very on the nose about its use of literary devices. And you made the point about Alan being an author insert. What song plays at the end credits?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. What is that? Space Oddity?
Yeah,
is that the name
Space
of the song?
Oddity.
Yeah. I'm like, had a brain fart.
David Bowie, who also went by Ziggy Stardust, his persona is Alan Wake, the Ziggy Stardust of Tom Zane.
I feel like you might be overthinking it. I think they just picked that song.
I know.
Just because
I know.
Ground Control to a Major Tom.
Yes,
that's the cynic in me. Maybe they did have a bigger plan. but
No,
that's
I
a
was
great theory.
I was half joking, but like when you made the point about the author insert, because the game's story is very much about the meta. The more and more you look at it, because again, a lot of these characters just fit, like I said before, just fit into like really. They do a good job of putting them in those archetypes, and they do it purposefully, and they fit in well into the overall narrative, so it all works. But it is very on the nose about it. So like it would make sense if it was a tie-in.
That's a really interesting theory that
For sure.
I could definitely fuck with. But yeah, with the Anderson brothers, another thing is them being in a metal band is how they incorporated the band Poets of the Fall as this fictional band, the Old Gods of Asgard, into this universe, which is a band that was also featured in Control. And I think the Max Payne games, which were the first two, were also developed by Remedy back in the 2000s. So yeah, that's kind of how they're sort of taking those and writing them into this universe, which is interesting, and using these characters as the throughput for that. These songs were performed by these two brothers with their band in their youth. I find that pretty interesting, but I also definitely agree that they do set up for probably the most the coolest set piece, so to speak, in the game, which is the stage fight.
Yeah.
Which is full of lots of spectacle, and you got an awesome track playing. It's similar to an event that I won't spoil that happens in Control. But yeah, I guess we're in agreement that was probably the coolest like fight set piece thing in the game.
For sure. And it makes sense too with the gameplay, because you're using light, and like what do stages have? They have like flashing lights and things like that, and the music just made the gameplay actually better than it is. Made it feel better than it is.
Yes.
Damn. All right. I mean, I guess we can just pivot right into that.
Well, before we do,
okay.
Question, because this is something that like I kind of missed. When they're showing Bright Falls at the very end, I probably should have asked this before, and everyone's like happy and things are light again. There's like a guy standing behind Rose in the diner. Who was that? They just like showed his face like for a quick second, and then it panned off to Alan.
I feel like I remember what you're talking about, but I can't remember the face.
Remember when they're showing everyone and they're like happy and celebrating that the darkness is gone?
The guy who was supposed to give him the keys to the cabin?
Oh, Stucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just looked, I don't know. He looked like mean.
Yeah, the character models all looked weird, except for, like Mark said, except for Alan.
So quickly looking it up real quick, apparently it was actually Nightingale.
Oh, okay. That explains why he looks so rude. I was just like, everyone's happy, and he's just there like like angry.
Yeah, finding a thread that answered the question of who it was. This person adds that perhaps that he was the new face of the Dark Presence. Considering Barbara was defeated, and we kind of don't know what happened to him. You know, in the beginning of Chapter 5, Episode 5, he's berating Alan while he's in the cell, and then suddenly the Dark Presence comes in and takes him. So. Yeah, I actually like that theory that maybe Nightingale is the new avatar for the Dark Presence.
That would make him have more of a purpose.
Yeah, I guess we won't know until the potential sequel to this game, but we'll talk about we'll get to that later. Yeah, is there any other things you guys want to talk about before we move on to some of the other things?
Nah.
All right. Why did you guys hate the gameplay so much? Because I don't agree.
I actually liked the gameplay initially for the first few hours. I was like, okay, it's simple, right? But because there were so many gameplay set pieces, and it got especially like annoying in the DLC, it just felt like it dragged out. Like they could have cut out so many gameplay sequences and had a shorter game, and it would have been so much of a better experience, because the main thing about this game that I enjoy personally is the story and the lore and like piecing things together. The gameplay was kind of just secondary to that, and although it was serviceable, it was just drawn out way too much.
There were also, because a lot of the combat arenas, a lot of it came down to level design, and even more than that, rudimentary design issues. God, where to begin? So let's start with the level design. So I agree. Piggybacking off of that, I agree for the sake of pacing. First of all, because it's such a narrative-driven game, less would have been more with the combat. But also that would have allowed them to focus more on designing levels that are smaller with smaller amounts of enemies to take more advantage of the mechanics and not bring out the major drawbacks. One of the problems with a lot of the encounters in this game is that while the mechanics are in many ways designed as you might design one of the popular survival horror games of that time period. Keep in mind this is Xbox 360, so you're talking about right after Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5 is coming out on PS3, Xbox 360.
Yeah, that
or in that time frame. So you're talking about survival horror moving into that over the shoulder third person.
Yeah.
Although in the case of this game, at least in my opinion, the camera and movement are both extremely wonky, even for third person of that era.
I would say movement.
Very janky.
I think the camera's intrinsically tied to the flashlight, right? And I think
that's
that
a problem.
Works. I think that worked great. Well, I think that worked great.
And here's the problem, and here's why I say you need less enemies and you need better designed combat arenas and mechanics with those enemies. The fact that the enemies can move so fast, they can gang up on you in such big hordes, they can spawn at random behind you without you even knowing. There's not much feedback even when you're damaging them, and you have to you're essentially depleting 2 health bars using 2 different sets of weaponry. You have to deplete their light health bar, which the game doesn't give you an inherent feedback for, other than
it does.
It gives you like the animation of the light breaking and stuff, but you have a light beam focused on them, plus whatever is going on around you that you have to try to keep track of.
Yeah, like when you have all the enemies together, and like you maybe got the light flash on one and not the other. Sometimes you there's no visual indication once you do that if you have multiple there of like the difference. Like I think there's like a slight opacity to it.
There's the circle that slowly shrinks as you're getting rid of their darkness.
It's so janky and it glitches so often. Half the time it didn't even show up on when I was playing.
I don't know why, because I never had that issue either on 360 or on the PS5 remaster.
And there's also a lot of, so I mentioned that in terms of control and combat design, it seemed like they were going for survival horror, and yet a lot of the combat encounters are almost designed for like third person action. But then the way they divvy out supplies throughout the game, it seems lopsided, where in sections of the game where you're encountering very few enemies, you're given shit tons of supplies, and you get almost nothing in sections where you're given or where you're encountering massive waves of enemies, and you don't really get a feel, and the game doesn't really indicate. Sometimes it does, like for instance, like that set piece. One of the reasons that set piece on the stage is so fun, aside from the fact that it's taking advantage of the light mechanic with all the stuff that's going on with the concert lights and whatnot, but the fact that they're just giving you stuff and telling you to go all out. You're given an indicator, go all out. Whereas other times you'll be surrounded by enemies, you'll run out of ammo, and all you have is a flashlight. You can't outrun the enemies, and they can start spawning anywhere at any time. They needed to, if they were going to have that much combat in the game, they needed to really hunker down and design the encounters better, and tune the enemies more, so it would be a little. And also, in terms of, I know I'm ranting, I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there, but this stuff was really like it was really almost hampering the experience for me because especially I was playing the game on normal and you get hit once and you're almost dead. Two hits and you're dead. Like so it gets extremely frustrating really fast.
The disparity between all the difficulties is really minimal. Like even I did the DLCs on easy, not because I felt I had to, but because I really wanted to get all the as many trophies as I could in one go.
I wish I would have done that.
I didn't think they were really that hard, but like I wanted to make sure I could get the trophies all in one go. I didn't want to have to replay them over and over and over and over and over again. So I did the DLCs only on just so I could try to do them all in one go. I wound up having to play both twice through. So what does that say? Probably should have just played them on fucking normal. But yeah, the difference between easy and normal isn't much. Like I feel like if I was dying in 4 hits on normal, I was dying in like 3 hits on or 5 hits on easy. You know, it really wasn't that much of a difference.
What about
even to?
Oh, go ahead. You're gonna answer my question.
Yeah, even to Nightmare, it was like it was a difference of maybe a hit.
Okay.
And that's kind of that's a bigger conversation to have about video game increasing the difficulty in a video game. You know, like what's the best way to go about that? I don't think it's the way. I don't think the way to go is to just like increase enemy health and decrease your damage. I think that's a really weak way to do it. But that's how a lot of video games do it, and that's kind of all this one does. So
I guess my core problem with the combat is that because you need to focus your light to break that shield in order to actually do physical damage, that means, and like you said, the camera is tied to the light. That means in order to break down that, unless you have a flashbang or the enemy is stupid enough to walk right into a flare, which almost never happens, your camera is laser focused on that enemy. Meanwhile, at any time, the game might spawn enemies behind you, and
that I agree with.
Maybe for me, the dodge button, like I just sucked at it, but the dodge button almost never worked. And if I got hit once, then the enemy could just follow up like twice, and I'm dead. Basically, that one mistake, and not to mention like there was I don't know if there was animation locks, so like when I started reloading, I couldn't dodge. And there was a weird animation lock between bringing up the flashlight whenever I hit the L1 trigger. The battery mechanic also just got frustrated. There was just so much going on at once that was just frustrating me.
And the worst part about it is Alan's stamina is hot garbage.
Yes,
his stamina is terrible. We will not argue about that. It's awful. Yeah, I mean, I agree with enemies spawning behind you being troublesome, right? For sure, that's frustrating. Usually the game, when you're not in an encounter and there's enemies behind you, the game will telegraph that. It'll zoom out and do the sound that like shows you, hey, there's enemies running at you. Yes. And the dodge, I definitely agree, is very finicky. It has very precise timing. And its timing is not what you'd expect. So if I would always do it way too late. You know, I would think it's right when it's about to impact you, and really you should dodge right when they lift their arm. And that's kind of a weird thing to get used to, and I never really quite did get used to it. I definitely agree with that. But I really like the fact that the flashlight is tied to your aiming. It's tied to your camera. Like everywhere you try to aim your camera, that's where Alan's gonna look. And that's mostly just because, like, I mean, that's the big draw to this game. That's the big mechanic. That's the big loop is light, the flashlight. Wherever you look, that's where you aims the flashlight. And with the combat, the combat's like fairly simplistic, right? And I feel like that's kind of fitting for a washed up writer dropped into a strange Pacific Northwest town looking for his wife. You know, he's not a combat expert, so with it being fairly simplistic, I feel like that's more fitting, and tying it around like the main draw of the game being light against the darkness. I don't know. I thought it worked well. I mean, it definitely wasn't Sorry, go ahead, Delaila.
No, I was just say that aspect of it I was fine with, but the thing that made that element annoying was the level design and the enemy spawns. Had it been more linear, I guess, where the enemy spawned in front of you rather than like at random places.
More like indoor sections. Like the indoor sections work fine because you could actually plan and like you would in a normal like survival horror game.
Yeah.
You could actually plan your approach so that you could have your back to a wall or something. But because so much of the game takes place out in the wilderness, and there's just you are right. Sometimes the game will like zoom out the camera to show you somebody's coming up behind you. Right. Other times you'll already be in the middle of a fight, and a new wave of enemies will just spawn behind you.
Right, and that's where the big problem comes in.
Yeah, you have no way of having any situational awareness of that. And there's a delay between like you can pop a flare, but it's really luck. Will the enemy be able to kill you before the animation finishes of you popping that flare?
Yeah, I definitely agree there needed to be some sort of indicator, like while you're in an encounter and someone else pops in from behind you, there definitely needed to be something that was letting you know that there's something coming in behind you. I definitely don't disagree. As far as level design goes, it's tricky, right? Because I definitely think there were too many stretches of you just running through the woods to the next like actual location. But you're in a Pacific Northwest woodsy town, so how do you get rid of the woods in a town that's full of woods? It's a tricky balance to just outright say like it needed less of this in a town that's full of it, you know?
I think in that situation, I would have preferred just less enemies or like more environmental stuff, like more like in the DLC they had a lot of like street lights and stuff like that you could use.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. The wood stuff,
more town sections. Like I thought we didn't get enough of the actual core town itself. I would have preferred that over a lot more of like. There are chapters where you feel like there's an hour and a half stretch that could have take that out, make one or two good encounters.
I did feel that the some of the episodes just had like some of them were just they overstayed their welcome a little bit.
Episode 3, I think it was the worst of them. It was like I think it was episode 3 where
I think that's the one where you have to go meet the kidnapper.
Yes.
You start off at the mine, and you have to go and go through like the train yard.
You get chased by the cops at one point, I think.
Well, that's at the beginning of that's the beginning of that chapter. Yeah. Yeah, I agree that in that section especially definitely overstays its welcome. I mean, I think that whole chapter is definitely the worst of the 6 in the main game. Because there's just really long sections of just nothing much happening. You just running through the woods and going from set piece area to set piece area, and like those are interesting, but like the long drawn out sections in between are just a bit much. I definitely agree that some of that stuff could have been cut out for a shorter, tighter experience. And that would have eliminated some of the combat encounters for sure. But that's all valid stuff.
I guess I was just approaching it from the mindset of this is going to be akin to a survival horror game.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
And if you think of Remedy's history, you were just talking about like they come from like Max Payne.
And they don't define this game as a survival horror game either.
Yeah.
And most people wouldn't. It has a horror aesthetic, right? It's a horror story that's coming to life. It's light versus darkness. It definitely has the veil of a horror game on top of it, but really it's an action adventure game.
Yeah.
And even on the cover of the box art, the original box art, they have it listed up here. Here I have the slip cover for the collector's edition right here. It says a psychological action thriller on top. Sorry, it's because I'm on camera. It's backwards.
They got some Kojima aspirations there. They got to label their game. Yeah.
The when you start fighting objects, I had such a hard time. I felt
I agree.
Like it honestly made me miss the enemies that I was annoyed by.
There were some mechanics that just needed to be out of the game, and that was one of them.
I mean, I think it would have been fine, but if you're like your dodge would apply to them, but it doesn't. It like
Yeah.
when they start flying at you, you better hope that they either don't hit you, like don't reach you with their velocity, or that you're hiding behind something that they'll hit before they get you.
That
like,
or
like
you can be walking past. You could be walking past an object that's possessed. It's just not floating in the air yet.
Yeah.
And accidentally touch it and like just lose like half your health. Like
yeah.
The same with like the puddles that like if you're not constantly looking at the ground, you accidentally hit a puddle and just lose half your health. Like
the puddles never really got me. The bear traps did a couple times. Just because I was an idiot not paying attention, but like the puddles I was able to avoid pretty easily. But yeah, there definitely needed to be some refinement. I don't disagree with that.
I think the saving grace for this is the fact that Control has some of the best gameplay I've ever experienced, and so I know that Remedy.
But
so does Max Payne. That's the thing. That's the thing is one of the things I was thinking of constantly while playing this game was if Control, because if I remember correctly when we did our episode on Control, and please go listen to our episode on Control.
Yeah,
I fucking loved Control as a game. I just wish it had a story. And with this game, it's like the complete opposite, where I was enjoying this story so much that it's fucking. I don't want to say awful. It's like an average game with some serious design flaws, I would say. Started dragging down the story for me to the point where, like, by the end, I was like, maybe I didn't like the DLCs not because of the way it affects the ending. Maybe I didn't like the DLCs because I just didn't want to play anymore. Like,
well, yes, I mean that the thing is the DLC ramped up the difficulty because it was no longer about like using your arsenal to fight. It was like don't use your arsenal and like run past as much as you can to avoid the enemies, which was a completely different gameplay stance than the main game.
If you took Control, like not Control's obviously exact gameplay, but if you took the level of polish and design acumen in Control's gameplay and meshed it with the storytelling capability on display in this, like, it would be like a crazy, super half-human, half-Cylon baby. Like,
yeah, this is a very different game, you know? That's kind of why I'm like, should this game really play more like Control? I don't really think so.
I'm not talking about the exact like gameplay design. Okay. I'm just saying the level of polish and the level
but also remember there's like almost a decade between.
Obviously. You can tell.
Like even going back to like the Max Paynes, right? There's a good chunk of time between Max Payne 2 and Alan Wake, and they're both very different games.
Yeah.
So like I don't know.
Max Payne is a very straightforward action game, although was it the first game to have bullet time in it?
Maybe. That might have been
regardless.
Yeah. It's like Remedy had like they had a vision for this game, and like to like make it more actiony, I think would have been very at odds with game was trying to convey, right?
I wanted the complete opposite. I wanted what I'm advocating, or what I would have advocated for would have been to tone down the amount of action and instead focus on making individual enemies maybe have more mechanics and make the levels smaller and tighter. They don't necessarily need to be like indoors. They could still be like the outdoor wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Just make the areas smaller and maybe more constrained that you have to work around them with the mechanics of the enemies. Focus on less but more complex enemies than trying to swamp you.
What I think would have been better is definitely like less like going back to like, you know, your complaint about there being too many combat encounters. Overall, the mechanics not really working for them. This game didn't have all that many puzzles in it. Like replace some of those combat encounters with some puzzles, and I think we're square. You know?
Yeah, just cut it. Like this would have been a fine like 5-hour game, and I think we could have still gotten
5 hours.
Jeez.
Yeah, well, or like 5 to 8. You know,
I'm like totally on. Delaila and I are like totally on the same page about this game. Like,
I'm just sitting here defending Alan Wake's honor. No, but I don't totally disagree with you guys.
Yeah.
I definitely think like going back to what the woodsy sections, very long and drawn out, definitely bloated out the game. full of combat encounters that didn't really need to be there. I just think replacing those with some puzzles and like really lean more into what a lot of survival horror tropes include are like these just really obtuse, stupid puzzles. Like we had a few, right? We had like some light puzzle we had to work out. There was the elevator puzzle that I think was pretty good. But like it felt like more like an early game. And there really just weren't a whole lot of there wasn't a lot of puzzle solving to do, and that's disappointing. I think there should have been more. Because who cares about them fitting in? They could find ways to fit the narrative. Maybe Thomas Zane wrote like, oh, Alan had to go find Barry, but first he had to solve this Rubik's Cube. And like just figure out stupid ways to write that in. You're so much with like
the dark world just turns into Psychonauts. Like Alan Wake shrinks and he's down on a Rubik's Cube and has to push the blocks around. Yeah.
Hey, I would love that. Give me more Psychonauts. That's great. Let's get me on my quick discussion about Twin Peaks real quick, so we can just get off that train and maybe work towards wrapping this bad boy up. Because like I said, yeah, I didn't realize this last time I played this game. I hadn't watched Twin Peaks, and now playing this game again, I'm like, holy shit, this is just this might be more Twin Peaks the video game than Deadly Premonition is, and Deadly Premonition is like Twin Peaks as fuck. The diner in this game is nearly a perfect recreation of the diner in Twin Peaks.
I feel like I'm never going to watch this show now because you talk about it so much. I'll just inadvertently be disappointed.
No, but it's so good. But yeah, like it's like confirmed that this game is like heavily inspired by Twin Peaks, and like it's really obvious it's obvious to me as someone that's watched it in so many ways. Like the diner, it's literally a recreation of the diner in Twin Peaks, the Double R. There's coffee thermoses. Coffee is such a big thing in Twin Peaks. The first trophy or achievement you get for getting 25 coffee thermoses is a Twin Peaks quote. What else? The receptionist in the sheriff's office talks exactly like Lucy does, and I already mentioned Cynthia basically being an insert for the log lady. It's like, go watch Twin Peaks if you haven't, because if you liked this game, you'll probably like Twin Peaks, and there's just so much Twin Peaks love in this game. Yeah, I don't necessarily need to say much more. I know you guys haven't seen it, so I think this is gonna be a thing where it's like every episode I'll find some reason.
Well, it sounds like Twin Peaks is in turn just taking a lot from Stephen King, like classic Stephen King.
No, it not really.
I don't know anything about it, so
yeah, it's kind of like David Lynch and Mark Frost wanting to kind of bring David Lynch especially bring his surreal energy to television, a television serial, and tell a mystery. And that's another thing this game kind of plays into. It's very much structured like a TV serial, leading towards the solution to this mystery, which is very much what Twin Peaks, the first season and the first few episodes, second season, were doing. It was all leading up to solving to giving the answer to the mystery of who killed Laura Palmer. So yeah, this game just took so much inspiration from that show, and as a big fan, it really made me giddy to see it all.
Speaking of which, I thought it was really cool that you could turn on the televisions and the in-world insert for the Twilight Zone. I forget what the show is called in there, but
Night Springs.
Night Springs is playing, and then it turns out that Alan Wake actually started his career writing for the show, which I thought was a cool little way to work into the story.
Did you watch the Night Springs episodes that you could watch?
I totally did.
I listened to it a little bit after I turned it on the television. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But I just kind of kept going on. I didn't sit and watch fully through now.
Yeah, some of them, I felt like a lot of them were really boring, but there were a few that were really, really gripping. The one that I really liked was the girl driving in a car with her friend, and they see someone run over on the road, and they stop, and it's her friend, and her friend that she was driving with behind her, who's the same guy. She turns around, and the truck's coming to run him over, and it hits him, and then she's back in the car driving with
Mhm.
him, and it's just like this endless loop of her friend getting hit by a truck. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And there was another one with this guy claiming he had quantum immortality.
Oh, that one was
and
my favorite. Yeah.
yeah, that one was really cool too. He had this machine that when he went to pull the trigger to his head, um, it
He
would
just wouldn't die.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was going to split into 2 timelines, and his machine would always ensure that the timeline they would be in would be the one where he survives. And someone accidentally kicked the plug out from the machine, but the guy was so caught up in his own ego that he didn't pay attention and wound up killing himself.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just a
That
cool.
was-
It's and again, it's another cool meta thing too, because a lot of famous authors, either got their start or contributed, and not many people realize a lot to the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
So like one that comes to mind who is actually very close with Stephen King is George R. R. Martin. Got his career started in the Twilight Zone, back in like was it I think it was the 80s. It was before the 90s when he started writing A Song of Ice and Fire, but yeah, and I think I'm sure Stephen King wrote for Twilight Zone at some point. But yeah, a lot of authors have written for Twilight Zone.
Cool. One last thing I want to bring up about the collectibles that I kind of thought was, basically, Jason, I don't really blame you for not seeking out the collectibles yourself. Besides the manuscript pages, collectibles are useless when they don't give you anything for collecting, right? And an achievement or trophy is like fine, but like there's no incentive other than that. And for most people, they're not really going to care. So to like collect all 100 coffee thermos and get kind of like nothing in return really kind of sours me as somebody that like, you know, like earlier this year, like Resident Evil Village, a game that like I wasn't through the moon positive on, but like I definitely liked that there were lots of things to find and do and get that would unlock concept art.
Resident Evil always is good with that, yeah.
Yeah,
almost
like,
always, yeah.
Really, I just like when a game rewards you for seeking out its secrets, right? If a game, if there's going to be collectibles, well, give me something in game as a reward for seeking these things out. And this game had absolutely none of that, other than giving you for it, and that really just sucks. Like, give me some concept art or some neat little
unlimited
extra manuscript.
Flashlight.
Again,
some cheats would have been cool too. Some cheats to play around with.
I think the collectibles were almost them in a way working. Again, I keep mentioning how on the nose they are with like meta stuff, because obviously the manuscript pages themselves are a key plot MacGuffin, and then I thought at least the coffee thermoses was a meta reference to, because there's that week gap where Alan is supposed to be furiously writing this manuscript up, and I thought it was supposed to be like a reference to like him chugging coffee. Again, that was me before I reached the end of the game speculating that maybe this is him descending into insanity as he's trying furiously to write a new story. And he's like, it's literally like The Shining, like he fucking goes insane and starts killing people as he's instead of writing his story.
It's also prior to me going on my big tirade about this and how this game is so influenced, and coffee's like a big thing in Twin Peaks. So, but yeah. I think that it doesn't go much further than that. But
it's like a good thermos. It looks like a good thermos.
Yeah, it's really tall. All the thermoses are really tall thermoses. You fit a lot of coffee in there.
Yeah, keep your coffee hot for days.
One last thing I want to bring up before we try to wrap up is I mentioned this to you guys earlier, but the remaster, if you haven't played the remaster, they added in 3 QR codes just like hidden in the backdrops of certain areas. Like I think there's one in the tutorial on this one billboard you find during that whole segment. There's one I think in Sheriff Breaker's office. And there's another one somewhere else. I think in one like a random cabin you find like later in the game. But scanning those QR codes brings you to unlisted YouTube videos of visions of Alan Wake talking. and they're all like just a minute long. But like it's seemingly him talking after the events of the game. So I think they're worth seeking out, especially about what we're about to talk about with the final question. Just because it's like it's a good thing that they like. It's a nice thing that they added into the remaster, right?
I
They,
think
like,
that's really cool. I love shit like that.
yeah, like it was the first thing I noticed in the tutorial. I'm QR code on this board, and I'm like, I don't remember that being there in the original game when I played it, and I scanned it, and sure enough, brings me to a video that was uploaded like 5 months ago, unlisted on Remedy or Remedy's YouTube channel.
Nice.
As like a secret to find. I thought that was so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And like you could speculate about what it is he's talking about, and we'll get to that in the final question. Do you guys have anything else to talk about you want to bring up before we move on to the
No.
Jason?
No.
Okay. Final question time. Here we go. What's where do you see the story going? What's your basic pitch for an Alan Wake sequel?
I was just gonna piggyback off like what Jason's been saying the whole episode, where he descends into madness and starts killing everyone.
It's literally like Alan Wake 2 just opens up with Alan Wake fucking frozen in the Pacific Northwest, staring at the camera like the end of The Shining. And it turns out he was just a pawn of Zane the entire time, and it's just a new character that's a new, and like it was like Zane. Not Zane is the darkness, but Zane manipulates the darkness. He's almost playing God. I don't know, something like that.
Man, you guys really paint Thomas Zane as like this bad guy.
Because I went into it thinking it's gonna be psychological horror, so I was expecting it to go real like macabre, you know.
Gotcha. I guess something I should have pointed out to you guys. This game is rated T for teen, so there couldn't be anything too bad in it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I prefer the bittersweet ending of the main game as opposed to like the idea of there's hope he can get back. I'm like, no, fuck that. He sacrificed himself. Like it's a satisfying ending, and it neatly ties together where the story opens and where it, where it ends.
In one of those visions, he mentions needing a detective to help him get back. Well, here's the thing, right? And this is kind of where I'm headed with my headcanon fan theory, is that because the thing is, we didn't talk about this at all.
I love noir, and I love me some Max Payne, and Max Payne in this universe.
Well, see, I'm not sure, because the last Max Payne game we got wasn't even developed by Remedy; it was developed by Rockstar.
Right. I think Rockstar owns the rights to it. Yeah.
But we didn't talk about this, but the Alan Wake, he's famous. He's a famous writer for writing his long-running series of these novels about a detective named Alex Casey. And what I'm kind of leaning towards, because of that Vision video that I watched, I'll link those in the description for anyone to check out. But he mentions like needing a detective to help him get back. So, and he's writing The Return, or he's writing Return while he's in the dark place to try and get himself back, needing a detective. I think he's going to write Alex Casey into existence to help him get back. And I think that's where the next game is going. Is it's not going to be an Alan Wake game, but it's going to be an Alex Casey game where you're a detective that gets roped into all this stuff trying to help Alan get back. That's kind of what I want to see. I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah. As long as it plays, it has like some different mechanics.
Yeah,
stuff
sure.
More like detective leaning would be really interesting. I think like maybe some LA Noire stuff. As long as they fix up the facial. Because
I would love a mix of like that, exactly what you're talking about, and then throwing in some action set pieces and kind of taking that acumen from Max Payne, and kind of to balance each other out. Something like that would be fucking amazing. Just unlike Control, actually, you gotta have that narrative there too, though.
I mean, well, we won't get into it. I'm not gonna talk about it.
Watch our episode on Control. It is a good. Control is still a game worth playing though. I don't want to deter people from playing.
For what its main plot is lacking, its side quests are not. They are incredible. But yeah, that's kind of what I envision for the sequel. And you know, Remedy's, they've been teasing it for so long. Something I wanted to mention during the history lesson is, and I found this to be so wholesome and just very unifying between a game developer and its fans. The remaster for Alan Wake was actually confirmed and announced by Sam Lake, the head of Remedy, on the Alan Wake fan site.
Huh.
He worked with them to write up this thing and announce the game through a huge Alan Wake fan site, which I thought was great. That's such a great way to, you know, give back to your fans, right?
Yeah.
These people were so passionate to be running this site and be talking about this game a whole decade later. So to give it back to them and make that the stage for the announcement of this, even though it did get leaked ahead of time, I think due to getting rated in Taiwan or Korea a week or so before the actual announcement happened. But still, that was such a great way to confirm this, right? Is doing this on this fan site, these people that are so passionate about your project. I just thought that was a great thing to do.
For sure.
Another thing I did want to point out, that one flashback sequence when you're in Alan's apartment and he watches himself on a talk show interview, and the person sitting next to him for whatever reason is Sam Lake, the head of Remedy, and they even Sam, and he's there it's so weird. And I Sam Lake is basically the new Kojima, I guess you could call him. Look at him as just the latest and greatest Kojima. He makes a lot of book references the same way Kojima makes a lot of film references games. Yeah, that's another thing we didn't even talk about. They make a lot of allusions to books and even films that are based on books. You know, they bring up The Shining. There's a bunch of others that I can't even recall off the top of my head, but Jason,
they talk about they mention native. Obviously, it's the Pacific Northwest. They mention Native Americans a lot. A lot of the architecture is very reminiscent of the hotel from The Shining. I mean,
plus the
a lot of it
in the door.
Yeah, a lot of it could be coincidental, but I
don't think it is at all.
Yeah.
No, I think Sam Lake is flexing the same. That's why Sam Lake is the new Kojima. And even in finding a way to insert himself in the game, it's a very
which I guess then makes sense why at times it feels like this story could have almost been told in another medium.
Yeah, that's also a Kojima move.
It's
being a little, you know, even a little obtuse about your story. Yeah, I one last thing I wanted to bring up, but all right, you guys ready to wrap this bad boy up?
Yeah,
Jason, what's the Kwasnicki rating?
I feel bad because I really did enjoy the story. It's not perfect. I have criticisms, but I enjoyed it. And ironically, that's why I have to give the game and remember everybody, I rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being trash fire, 10 being masterpiece, 5 being average.
I'd like to know what each one of those levels is.
So this game gets a 5.5 manuscripts, largely because it's what I would summarize it as is average but very, very flawed gameplay design, weighing down what is otherwise a very, very enjoyable ride that could have been shorter, tighter, more polished, and better designed in terms of the actual game that's conveying that narrative ride.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, Delaila, what you working on?
Yeah, I've released a passion project for my experience with the PlayStation a year later, piggybacking off my 3-month video. It's one of those videos that I put a little more time into than my others. And yeah, I've just been streaming a bunch of GTA on Twitch.
Oh God, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm getting very toxic in there.
Dealing with those cracked out models.
Yeah, pretty much. It's all good.
Boy.
I did overall. I enjoyed your PS5 a year later video. You started off with tucking it into a little baby carriage, and I was like, oh God, it's a 1-year-old now. Here we go. Just
you.
get ready for those terrible twos. That's what I always hear. Jason, what you working on? Anything? Smoking your vape?
Nah, just still. Well, actually, I haven't been playing Final Fantasy 14 because I've been playing this Alan Wake. But I have been watching Battlestar Galactica. Very good show. If you haven't watched it, maybe as good as Twin Peaks. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever watch.
I don't know
Twin
about
Peaks
that.
now.
Oh, that's a bold statement.
Have you ever watched Battlestar Galactica?
Yeah, an episode here or there.
No, you got to watch the whole thing. But it is November, so it is National New Novel Writing Month. So to all those writers out there who are writing, I say to you, good luck.
Very fitting for this episode.
Yeah,
yes.
Very. Don't
go crazy.
If you write a fucked up story, hope it doesn't come to.
Yeah. Don't kill your wife and kid.
I know I plugged this like a whole bunch.
That might make for a good story for someone else. So who knows?
I plugged this a few times. I'll plug it again. From Gamers Magazine, I wrote the review for Scarlet Nexus. That issue is now out. You can go get it at fromgamers.net. And also, issue 3 has, as of today, been successfully funded on Kickstarter. So,
oh yeah.
And I think the campaign, I think it's about to end. So, yeah, if you didn't get your chance to kickstart it, don't worry. When it comes out, it'll be available. Just follow them on Twitter at FromGamersMag. And yeah, you can pick up issue 2 and read my Scarlet Nexus review. Spoilers, I thought it was a good game for the most part.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
Yeah, it was all right. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. You can follow Delaila on Twitter at Assassina_San. You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuas, but don't follow him. He's
I don't post. Yeah, there's nothing to follow.
What's the thing you always say?
Social media, the mind killer.
There it is. There we go.
Now you actually get the reference.
If you like this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and share the episode. Let us know in the comments whatever I said earlier. I don't know. What did I say to let us know about?
If they want us to play Deadly Premonition?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube if you want us to play Deadly Premonition. And yeah, subscribe to the channel. I posting these on YouTube's, so yeah, any help is appreciated. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, rate and review the show, please. 5 stars preferred. And yeah, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, and like everything, and engage with us and talk to us on the Twitter and whatever. Just like, please let us know that we're doing something good.
Yeah.
Or something bad, whatever it is. Delaila, what's our next game? What's the next episode? Game episode that we're doing?
Yeah, so we're gonna do a bonus episode in December, but in January we'll be doing Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect.
Yeah, I've been under a lot of pressure from people in my life to finally play the Mass Effect. So this is forcing me to do it finally, which is good. But I think it'll be fun. And yeah, that'll be in January, so you got 2 months to get to that. Stay tuned next month for a bonus episode. Probably talking about the Game Awards, because those nominations came out today, and yeah, we've all got opinions about those.
Oh, we got opinions.
And that'll be a really fun episode. It's wake of the wake of the award show. So yeah, look forward to that next month. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.